The debate over whether Prince Harry and Meghan, Duchess of Sussex, could ultimately lose their royal titles has undergone a dramatic transformation. What was once dismissed as speculative chatter confined to tabloids and online forums has now matured into a serious constitutional discussion, unfolding quietly but unmistakably at the heart of Britain's establishment. Recent briefings attributed to Prince William have accelerated that shift, signaling that the monarchy is no longer content to tolerate a situation many insiders now describe as structurally incoherent. There has been no formal proclamation, no dramatic palace announcement, and no public ultimatum. Yet behind the scenes, constitutional lawyers, senior advisors, and political figures are increasingly aligned on one core assessment. The Sussex arrangement has become incompatible with the long-term credibility of the crown. According to multiple individuals familiar with internal deliberations, William has been unusually forthright in private discussions about the direction the monarchy must now take. These conversations, far from being impulsive or emotional, are described as deliberate, legally grounded, and rooted in a strategic vision of institutional survival. Importantly, this is not being framed as a vendetta against his brother or sister-in-law, nor is it portrayed as a reactionary purge driven by personal resentment. Instead, it is presented as a slow, methodical reckoning, one grounded in precedent, law, and a recalibration of what royal authority should mean in the 21st century. In this emerging framework, clarity is not cruelty, and reform is not punishment. It is governance. From the outset, those close to William stress that his perspective is defined less by family dynamics and more by institutional realism. The Prince of Wales is said to believe that the current arrangement, where Harry and Meghan retain prestigious royal titles while operating as private, commercially active figures abroad, has crossed a threshold from awkward to untenable. The contradiction, as he reportedly sees it, is not emotional but structural. Royal titles are not decorative accessories. They are vessels of authority, symbolism, and public trust. When those titles coexist with commercial branding, media monetization, and overt political commentary, the boundaries that once protected the monarchy's neutrality begin to erode. William's concern, according to senior royal correspondents, is that ambiguity has become the monarchy's greatest liability. In multiple conversations with advisors, he is said to have emphasized that the crown's strength does not rest on popularity or celebrity appeal, but on coherence. A monarchy that cannot clearly define who represents it, and under what conditions, risks appearing hollow. In his view, the Sussex model allows royal status to persist without royal accountability, creating a precedent that could haunt the institution for decades. This philosophy closely mirrors the long-standing vision of King Charles III, who for years has spoken of a slimmed-down monarchy. That idea, once treated as abstract or aspirational, is now actively shaping policy decisions. What has changed is not the concept, but the urgency. Where Charles historically favored gradualism and quiet consensus, William appears more inclined toward decisive structural clarity, particularly when delay risks further reputational damage. Crucially, the groundwork for any potential change lies not in palace intrigue, but in constitutional reality. Royal titles are neither mystical nor permanent. They are created, governed, and, under certain conditions, altered through letters patent, parliamentary statutes, and acts of parliament. While the reigning monarch retains broad discretion over styles and honors, the removal or redefinition of ducal titles is legally complex and requires careful navigation. William is reportedly acutely aware of these constraints, which is why discussions have focused on process rather than spectacle. Legal advisors, according to sources, have been tasked with examining historical precedents, including the 1917 Titles Deprivation Act and subsequent reforms that clarified eligibility for royal styles. These reviews are not aimed at targeting individuals, but at assessing whether existing frameworks still serve their intended purpose in a radically different media and political environment. What has undeniably shifted is the political climate. Members of Parliament and peers in the House of Lords have grown increasingly vocal about what they see as an untenable contradiction: the continued use of royal titles by individuals who openly criticize the institution that conferred them. Several lawmakers have argued, both privately and on the record, that titles should be explicitly linked to service, residency within the United Kingdom or Commonwealth, and adherence to defined standards of conduct. These arguments, once dismissed as fringe or reactionary, have gained mainstream traction. Public opinion polling over recent years consistently indicates majority support for limiting royal titles to working members of the family. William is said to view this shift as both an opportunity and a warning. On one hand, it provides democratic cover for reform. On the other, it underscores the risks of inaction. Failure to address the issue, advisors warn, could deepen public cynicism and erode trust in the monarchy's capacity for self-regulation. Behind closed doors, discussions have reportedly explored a spectrum of options rather than a single dramatic endpoint. One proposal under consideration involves restricting the use of titles without revoking them outright. This could include formal guidance prohibiting the use of royal titles in commercial ventures, media branding, or political advocacy. Another approach would involve further redefining styles, such as permanently eliminating the HRH designation, a step already partially implemented when Harry and Meghan stepped back from official duties. The most far-reaching option, revoking the Duke and Duchess of Sussex titles entirely, remains legally challenging but not inconceivable. Such a move would almost certainly require parliamentary involvement, potentially through updated legislation clarifying the conditions under which titles may be held. While complex, this pathway is no longer viewed as unthinkable. William's reported role in these deliberations is that of a pragmatist rather than an enforcer. Those close to him say he is acutely sensitive to optics and public perception. He understands how punitive measures could be framed as vindictive, particularly given the Sussexes' long-standing narrative of marginalization. Yet he is also said to believe that the monarchy cannot be paralyzed by fear of backlash. Institutions, in his view, survive by setting boundaries, even when doing so provokes criticism. This represents a subtle but important generational shift. Where previous monarchs often relied on endurance and silence, William appears more willing to confront structural problems directly. The goal is not confrontation for its own sake, but resolution. The Sussexes' commercial activities have undeniably accelerated these debates. High-value media deals, global interviews, documentaries, and memoirs have blurred the line between private citizen and royal figure. Critics argue that even when explicit references are avoided, these projects implicitly trade on royal status. William's reported concern is that each such venture reinforces the perception that royal titles are assets to be monetized. That perception, advisors warn, threatens the monarchy's claims to political neutrality and moral authority. There is also an international dimension that complicates matters further. Harry and Meghan reside primarily in the United States, a republic with no constitutional role for monarchy. Their titles carry no legal standing there, yet their global visibility ensures that their actions reverberate back to Britain. William is said to view this asymmetry as particularly risky. The crown absorbs reputational consequences without possessing any meaningful influence over the couple's choices. Family dynamics, while impossible to ignore, are not presented as the driving force behind policy discussions. William's relationship with Harry has undeniably deteriorated, particularly following revelations in interviews and memoirs. However, insiders stress that personal grievances are being deliberately sidelined. William has reportedly insisted that any changes be framed as institutional reform rather than family discipline, a distinction that is crucial for political legitimacy. King Charles III is described as broadly aligned with his heir, though characteristically more cautious. Charles favors incrementalism and consensus building, mindful of the monarchy's fragile position. William, by contrast, is portrayed as more direct, arguing that prolonged uncertainty only magnifies the problem. Together, they represent a coordinated strategy rather than competing agendas. Should reform proceed, the legal pathway would likely involve Parliament clarifying the conditions under which royal titles may be retained. Such reforms would be framed broadly, applying to all future cases, but their immediate impact would be most visible in the Sussex situation. William's emphasis on general principles over individual punishment is intended to ensure that reforms appear fair, modern, and defensible. Public reaction remains divided but increasingly pragmatic. While some view title removal as excessive, others see it as overdue housekeeping. The monarchy has survived for centuries precisely because it adapts. Streamlining roles, reducing the number of working royals, and redefining ceremonial functions have all been part of that evolution. Addressing the Sussex question may simply be the next chapter. International comparisons strengthen this argument. Other European monarchies have redefined or withdrawn titles when family members stepped outside prescribed roles, often without lasting institutional damage. William is reportedly well aware of these precedents and views them as evidence that clarity can enhance legitimacy rather than diminish it. For Harry and Meghan, the stakes are significant. Titles shape identity, access, and influence. Losing them would represent a definitive severing of formal ties to the monarchy. While the couple has emphasized independence, the symbolic loss would be profound. William's reported view is that symbolism works both ways. Retaining titles while rejecting obligations sends a message that the monarchy lacks the will to enforce its own standards. The timeline for any action remains uncertain. Palace sources emphasize that discussions are ongoing and confidential. Yet the mere fact that these conversations are occurring at senior levels marks a decisive shift. What was once dismissed as fantasy is now a serious constitutional consideration. Ultimately, this is not just a story about Harry and Meghan. It is a story about what the monarchy chooses to be. William's reported stance suggests he sees this moment as a test of institutional resolve. If the crown cannot define who may carry its symbols, and under what conditions, its authority risks dilution. Conversely, principled reform could reinforce relevance and integrity. Whether titles are restricted, redefined, or revoked, the direction of travel is unmistakable. The era of ambiguity is ending. Prince William's alleged candor has not revealed a conspiracy, but an acknowledgement of reality. The monarchy is changing, and difficult decisions are inevitable. For the Sussexes, that means their royal status rests on increasingly unstable ground. For the crown, it means confronting a challenge it can no longer postpone.